This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Stick around to find out how you can get 83% off and 3 extra months for free. Hey, Marcus House with you here. This week we are going to be taking a look at SpaceX's upcoming orbital launch complexes in Boca Chica. We'll be discussing what each element of the complex does, how the launch complex will operate, and how it's different to other launch complexes around the globe. Huge news as well for SpaceX being awarded a massive contract with NASA for the human landing system. We cover that along with a rundown of Starship updates for the week. There is a lot to cover in this one.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Firstly, the breaking news. It has only just been announced by NASA and SpaceX that NASA has selected the Starship, or a human landing system variation of the Starship that we see here, to land the first astronauts on the lunar surface since the Apollo program. This is massive news. In this design, we do see the Falcon 9-ish looking legs, as I've assumed for quite a while, so that still seems to be the most realistic leg system for Starship overall, regardless of the challenges that it imposes on the vehicle itself. We see here 4 legs as well instead of the 6 that I thought may have been the case in the longer term. It's super exciting to see Starship form such a critical part of the Artemis program, with the contract injecting almost $2.9 billion into SpaceX with a fixed term milestone based arrangement. This is huge. Congratulations there to SpaceX. Now a quick rundown of this week's goings on at Boca Chica. On Monday this week, Starship SN15 completed a cryogenic proof and thrust puck stress test. That all seemed to go well, with it standing up to the thermal stress of cryogenic propellant. On the Wednesday, SpaceX removed the thrust ram from underneath SN15, indicating that these tests were successful. The flight of this prototype arguably has the best chance of success yet, by building off the successes of SN8, 9, 10 and 11 and learning from each prototype's unique landing failures. That's most likely thanks to the introduction of hundreds of improvements on this vehicle. On Thursday at around 8 PM, all 3 Raptors were delivered to the launch site, and these are the first of the new generation of Raptor that we explored in detail in last week's video. These 3 Raptors are SN54, 61 and 66. Hopefully none of these let us down this time. This prototype is likely to be able to attempt a static fire this coming Monday, April the 19th. If this test is successful, we could see the next flight as soon as Wednesday, with Elon Musk here tweeting that SpaceX is aiming to launch its 5th high-altitude Starship test flight as early as next week. At the build site, SN16 stacking commenced on Wednesday, with the common dome being stacked onto the middle liquid oxygen section here. Then promptly on Thursday, the forward dome was then stacked on top, meaning that SN16 is now standing at 10 rings high. Interestingly, on Monday, BN1 was cut in half, with the top section being picked up by the gantry crane and brought down to ground that night. Since then, both halves have been taken apart and sent to the scrapyard. Then we saw BN2's forward and aft domes sleeved. What I want to cover today in more depth though is the development of the complex itself. Big shout out to Mauricio from RGV Aerial Photography and Mary from NASA Spaceflight for these images, giving us the chance to see these amazing developments as they happen. We can't cover things like this without them, so please do go and support both of them if you can. Now, construction at the Orbital Launch Complex first began in June of 2020, with the very rapid development being made for the foundation and the 6 support pillars for the orbital launch pad. In fact, development was so fast that the site just seemed to appear from almost nowhere in between the flight videos that SpaceX uploaded for SN5 and SN6's flight. It was honestly crazy just how much development was taking place, but then fairly shortly after that, development seemed to almost stop. It's not currently known why the construction seemed to cease, but it's speculated that SpaceX switching its focus to the testing campaign of the SN8 vehicle may have had influence on it. To further support this argument, just a week after SN8's extraordinary test flight, production ramped back up again, and it's only really gotten faster since, with these latest images showcasing just how much progress has now been made. Now that we've covered that, we can move onto the detail of the complex itself. We're going to start at the pad and work our way outwards. Our screen now is a render of what the pad could possibly look like, made by the amazing OBL on Twitter. It is important to note here that this is just an idea of what the pad will look like using the parts that we currently see at the Boca Chica construction site, and nothing has really been confirmed that much by SpaceX. The main part of the pad that we see here is the launch table. This is what the vehicle will sit on prior to launch itself. Unlike most launch pads, this will also have the fuel lines that will attach to the vehicle prior to launch. This is because Starship has to be filled from the base to allow for orbital refilling as well. The pad will also likely have these sorts of launch clamps that will hold the vehicle down until the massive beast is ready to lift off. This is important because if the engines ignite but then need to be shut down quickly, like we saw with SN10, the vehicle can remain safely on the pad. That is obviously much better than, hopping up slightly and then crashing back down to the pad, destroying the vehicle and likely the pad too. Now, this isn't a new idea, of course. Almost any launch facility has this, but it's good to note just how we see those mechanisms working. It was thought that this mysterious structure currently being constructed at the SpaceX shipyard in Boca Chica could be part of this clamp mechanism, but it now appears that this is more a device for testing the pressures the nose cones can take. That is not confirmed by SpaceX at this time, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Thanks a heap everyone for some of the feedback on that structure, and of course for liking and sharing these videos. It really does help get this work out there, along with of course subscribing to the channel. Everything we dive into, such as this topic today, is all possible thanks to all of that support. Thank you for helping us out. Now, you may have also noticed that unlike most launch pads, the pad in Boca Chica does not currently include a flame diverter trench. This would usually be an angled slope of some sort beneath the pad so that the ground beneath does not take the full force of the thrust that the engines create and throw debris back towards the rocket. At pad 39A in Kennedy Space Center, this is a large concrete structure that ramps upwards to create room for an angled slope beneath the pad itself. At Site 1 of Baikonur Cosmodrome, a giant flame trench was created by digging a trench in the ground. Elon Musk has said that SpaceX doesn't plan on using a flame diverter for the orbital launch pad, so we can assume that they will use a water deluge system similar to the ones that we've seen on the current suborbital test stands in Boca Chica. Seeing that a flame diverter-like system appears to have been installed at the Starship pad in Kennedy Space Center, SpaceX may have just changed their mind on this, at least for the booster. What do you think though? Should SpaceX use a flame diverter? Let me know in the comments. Heading away from the launch pad, we can now move to what is possibly one of the most exciting features of the orbital launch complex in Boca Chica. That is, of course, the 450-foot or 137-meter launch tower and catching arm. This launch tower is going to be absolutely crazy, rising up high above the Boca Chica beach. The launch tower has three main functions. The first function is a way of transporting crew members from the ground into the vehicle itself. There will likely also be an elevator and a staircase leading up to the small room that connects to the crew access arm. This is a small corridor that bridges the gap between the tower and the door to the Starship so that the crew can cross and board the vessel. This, we think, is likely going to look a little like the crew access arm at pad 39A that is used for boarding the Crew Dragon. Once the crew are on board here, the arm just swings away from the Falcon 9. This is done just prior to the Dragon spacecraft launch escape system being armed and the fueling taking place. In this launch animation, we get a good idea of what one of SpaceX's Starship towers are going to look like. It is likely that this is how the tower and pad area will look, because as we can see from these images by Mauricio, the tower and pad are being constructed at the same position as seen in the render. Maybe the launch table at the construction site will have more pieces welded onto it so that it looks something more like what we see in the render here, or maybe SpaceX will go with a different design entirely and will use a standard steel girder type structure. I think that the latter is actually more likely in the short term, at least for the initial launch pad. The second function of the launch tower is to stack Starships onto the pad itself. Now, this will be a fairly strange task for the launch tower to do, as usually this is only here to provide fuel to the vehicle, hold the vehicle down, and provide that crew access. The reason the tower will be used to stack Starships on the pad is to help with the vision of the Starship being rapidly reusable. Instead of having to wait for the vehicle to first be safe to approach, followed by of course rolling a crane down to the pad to stack it manually, you can land the Starship and then use the tower to stack it back onto the Super Heavy booster very rapidly. Because of this, the vehicle will be reconnected to the plumbing and the tank farm so that SpaceX can drain the remaining fuel back out and store it for a future launch. If they instead needed to wait hours for the fuel to drain or boil off before approaching, the fuel is essentially wasted along with all of that time. Remote stacking systems will save a lot of resources and hours to really help push towards the goal of a Starship being fully and rapidly reusable. The final main function of the tower is by far the craziest one and also kind of the coolest. I'm of course talking about the giant catching arm that will be made on the tower. This arm will be used to catch the Super Heavy booster right out of the air so that the booster doesn't have to land back on the landing pad itself, meaning that SpaceX can scrap those 4 gigantic legs that they were originally planning on using. We still expect of course that they're going to be using legs in the initial prototypes that we're seeing rolling out now, but in a longer term scenario this will save a huge amount of weight, which will of course equate to more payload in orbit per launch. As they say, the best part is no part. Now it is obviously unlikely that SpaceX are going to be catching these boosters in the short term, but as seen in this image from Mary, you can see from the label B&3 is going to have 4 landing legs. This is so that SpaceX can have more time to figure out the best design of that catching arm and of course to develop the entire system. They won't fully know how the Super Heavy booster will perform until they actually fly it. Perhaps it will be BN10 or above that will be the first booster prototypes without the landing legs. So the way this catching system will work is that the booster will descend down towards the tower and then hover for a moment to adjust itself into a good position. Then 2 arms of some sort will get into position around the booster. This will allow the booster to slowly descend into the arms using load points beneath the grid fins to take the weight of the booster itself. Now that is going to be an awesome sight to see. So depending on how the tower is designed, the booster will be either lowered directly back onto the launch mount, or maybe the tower will swivel in some way before lowering the booster. The latter method has the advantage that if the booster catch fails, the booster won't destroy the launch mount itself. So now for one of the features that we probably have the best idea about. This is the tank farm at the Orbital Launch Complex. This new tank farm will look vastly different from the current suborbital tank farm that we've seen so far. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but before that, a big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. A VPN or virtual private network gives you the ability to unlock the internet and grant you access to content that is blocked from your location. As an example, if you are trying to stream a video that is not available from within your country, you can just change the country that you're accessing the internet from, and that is it. You just refresh your browser and you will now appear to be located in the selected region. That content and much more is now available to load. One of the most useful features is being able to protect your privacy from those around you. In many cases, local network logs within your environment are recording your online behavior. Maybe within those networks, you also have been restricted from social platforms or external news services. That is no longer a problem with Surfshark VPN. With the included tools, you can protect yourself from data mining services that are using your search history to advertise to you. What is also great is that you can connect all of your family devices simultaneously with a single account. If you would like to support my channel here and are considering a new VPN or changing your existing VPN, go to surfshark.deals/Marcus and you'll get 83% off and 3 extra months for free. The link is there in the description below. So yes, this tank farm will look very different from the current suborbital tank farm. For starters, there will be 7 vertical tanks in a 2-row configuration, unlike the current tank farm which is made up of 15 tanks placed in 6 rows. Another big difference between the 2 tank farms is the tanks themselves. These suborbital tanks were bought by SpaceX from an external company. These new tanks are being built on site with the same stainless steel rings that the Starships are actually made from themselves. Currently, these ground support equipment tanks, or GSE tanks, are in progress, and we've even seen them being moved now down towards the launch site. Hopefully we will see the entire set of them being transported soon down to the Orbital Launch Complex, where they will be stacked on a base that has already been prepared here for it. So these tanks are going to feed the propellants and the pressure gases into the Starship plumbing system via the underground pipes that we've seen being installed recently. These pipes being below the ground help to protect them during a launch. Now, we believe that there is likely to be 2 methane tanks, 2 oxygen tanks, 2 nitrogen, and 1 water tank at the farm itself. This would allow enough propellants to be stored to fully fuel a super heavy booster and Starship vehicle. You may be wondering where SpaceX will actually get this fuel from. Currently, SpaceX gets regular fuel deliveries from an external company. As you can imagine, buying these fuels in bulk costs a lot, and if there is low stock, this could affect how many launches are possible. So SpaceX has come up with a long-term solution to this problem that has a few benefits. This is, of course, SpaceX's propellant production plant. This is where SpaceX plans to create their fuel on site, and this can be achieved by literally pulling some of the commodities right out of the air. Earth's atmosphere has a lot of nitrogen and oxygen, so all that's really required is separating them from the other gases in the atmosphere and then transporting them to the fuel farm, likely by the pipe system. The liquid methane is slightly harder to create. This can be made by reacting hydrogen and carbon dioxide at an extremely high temperature. This is a great benefit for Starship in the long term, as it will help achieve the goal of Starship being carbon neutral. This is because the carbon dioxide that is pulled from the atmosphere that Starship produces can be recycled into more fuel instead of just being left to pollute the atmosphere. Elon has also stated that this is a major goal for the Starship program itself. Now, there is a lot to talk about with the gas production site. It's an entire subject almost by itself, so maybe I'll do a deeper dive on this alone in a later video. For now, we'll explore a few of the site's other facilities. Let's talk about the landing pad first. Pad A here is currently a shared pad for Orbital Launch Complex A and testing stands A and B. There isn't really much to talk about with these pads themselves, as they're essentially giant concrete slabs that Starships land on, or in some cases explode on. Yeah, Pad A has really taken a massive beating over the course of its life so far. Just look at the crater that SN8 caused on its hard touchdown. Of course, since then the pad has been reinforced and has had an X logo painted in the center, similar to Of Course I Still Love You and Just Read the Instructions, the drone ships the Falcon 9 is continuously landing on. There are also plans though to build a second landing pad that will most likely be exclusive to Orbital Complex B. These pads are surrounded by dunes made from sand and dirt. These are sprayed with water prior to flight, which reduces the amount of dust that is kicked up during the landing itself. It's unlikely, we think, that SpaceX will continue to use these pads when the Starship enters operation. SpaceX will likely look for a better long-term solution as soon as possible. This will potentially migrate to offshore orbital launch platforms to totally avoid the noise pollution, the road closures, and a forecast of raining Starships over a populated area. For now, there is also a bunker just outside the launch mount area that will be used in the case of emergency. We'll likely see a similar zipline basket system that has been seen at Pad 39A. These are used by crew to quickly get out of the vehicle and into the bunker should an anomaly occur during the propellant loading. Now, in this tweet from RGV, we can see a power bay and communication building. This building will be used to store and provide power to all different areas of the launch complex, as well as ensuring stable communication between launch control and the complex itself. There is also a roadway for Starship vehicles to be transported from the highway over to the launch stand. Someday in the future, we may see 5 Starships or more lined up at the orbital launch sites, just like aeroplanes, ready to be flown on the same booster. Wouldn't that be an amazing sight to see? It really is exciting just to see how crazy the development speed is at the Starbase, and I just can't wait to see what the Orbital Launch Complex is going to look like when it is finally finished in its construction. I'm sure it is going to be absolutely incredible. Now, just remember, we are huge supporters of the transition to electric vehicles here on the channel, and our partner EV offers the ability to hire an electric vehicle in Australia. Perhaps you have wanted to take an extended test drive. You could be touring the country and want to drive around in a Tesla. If that sounds appealing to you, you can use the link in the description for a discount. As always, a massive thank you to the amazing patrons and YouTube members here. There is no way that we can continue creating all of this content at this frequency and quality without you all. The support that you all here provide allows us to increase all of the time that we can spend, and that is all thanks to that growing list there. Thank you to each and every one of you. As the support increases, that helps the entire team that we work with here. So if you like what we're doing and you'd like to join up as a YouTube member or a Patreon here at patreon.com/MarcusHouse, that would be very awesome of you. Either of those options gives you access to interact with me more directly via the linked roles on our Discord server. You can also have your name listed right here like all these other amazing people. You can also have earlier and ad-free access to these videos to watch before anyone else. Big thanks of course to the production crew assisting greatly with video production, and of course to the quality control squad here for helping me research and proof the material for all of these videos. If you're interested in these topics and you'd like to be a part of this, follow me on Twitter and please do get in touch. In the tile in the bottom left today we have my video last week, in the top right is my latest video, and in the bottom right content that YouTube has selected from my channel just for you. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video.